Can you guys hear me well in the back? Good? Okay, awesome. Great. So I'm going to give you guys a presentation that's not so much about my employer, though I'll talk a little bit about that towards the end, but it's about what it means to look for a co-op, what it means to hire a co-op, but importantly, what that does for you and who you have to be the best co-op, and then eventually the best junior developer at a new company, right? Which is what we wish to all of you. So let me kind of quickly intro myself. So I was born and raised in France. So like most of you, I wasn't born or raised here. And I came here about 18 years ago. I've got myself a master in computer science. My focus was AI, which is very different from AI today, and system programming. I've been a CTO, VP of engineering for a little while now. I was at Constant Contact for a long time, where I had about 50, 60 people in my organization, some of them very junior, some of them co-ops, and some of them very accomplished with 20, 25, 30 years of experience. I'm currently EVP of engineering at Validity, and I'll talk about that towards the end. Before that, I was a product manager, and before that, I was a developer. One thing I want to talk about in my experience is that I went to school for my undergrad and my master to one of the rare schools at the time which offered a co-op program. So we did 3 co-ops throughout a 5-year courses, and it was great. It was eye-opening because, you know, whether you do 3 co-ops or 1 co-op, 1 6-month co-op in your current program, what it does is that it gives you a 6-month at least advantage compared to anybody who was graduating from, say, BU and is, you know, an undergrad or even as a master, right? So in addition to the work that most of you have done, you know, prior to coming to Northeastern, you're getting another 6 months most of the time in a U.S. company, and you get to learn all of that. And that co-op is really important, and that's why it's important to present yourself well for that co-op and get that good co-op. And I know it's difficult. It's difficult for me to hire the right co-ops. It's difficult for you guys to find the right co-op and to find a co-op in general, because there's quite a bit of competition. So you might kind of look at this, say this is too much. I can deal with being in class on time. I can deal with doing my projects with a small group. I can you know, do the exams and all of this. But this seems very overwhelming, which is completely understand. Believe it or not, I'm a pretty shy person, and it's really hard for me to talk to people that I don't know, unless it's 50 people in front of me that I don't know. Then it's pretty easy. But it's you know, I remember when I showed up for my first interviews, that's very difficult, right? So how can you prepare yourself to feel really kind of secure and strong and say, like, you know what, like, they should be lucky to have me as a co-op, right? And we'll go through not, you know, mind mapping techniques to do this, but basically kind of technical things you can do to really prepare yourself. And I want to talk about co-ops, but I want to talk about something that happens in France called Le Tour de France. And you guys might know of it as a cycling competition that happens every year, and it's a big one. It's existed for 100 years. But this is not where the name actually comes from. The Tour de France is a practice that used to happen in the 17th century in France, and that had to do with people were like 12 years old, maybe 10, maybe 8, and their parents would be like, well, you know, we sent that one to be a priest, we sent that one to be a warrior, that one's going to work with us in the farm. This guy, I don't know what to do with. I'm going to send him, and he's going to become an apprentice. Maybe he's going to know how to make a table or a door. He's going to know how to work, you know, stones, or maybe he's going to learn how to make watches or whatever, right? So the families would send those 8 10, 12-year-old kids to learn with a master, right? So you'd send them to the village, wood maker, and he would take that kid and say, I'm going to teach you how to do it, right? And in a way, a co-op is a little bit like that, right? And you have to think of your co-op, but also the first few jobs as that opportunity to learn from the masters, right? Which is why choosing your first co-op and choosing your first job is really important. Because if you end up in the wrong company with the wrong environment, you're not going to get that 6 months advantage. When you've worked for 2 or 3 years in the wrong company, in the wrong environment, you're not going to have that advantage over other people. You're not going to have progress much beyond your education. So in the Tour de France, I'll just continue the palaver here, but what people used to do is they would become apprentice, then around like 14 or 15 that have learned everything that person could teach them, and then they would go and do the Tour de France, and they would go from master to master all around France, and they learn. Let's say it's a watchmaker apprentice. They would learn over there how to make those white enamel dials. They would look over there, and they'd learn how to do work with gold. And they would work with that master, because that master was the best at making very precise time instruments. So they would go all over France and learn from 4 or 5 different people. And then thank you, Mary Claire.
Hi, how are you?
Good. And then what they would do at that point is there would be, what's called a companion. And what the goal of every companion would be is to become a master, right? To be the one that people go to and learn from, right? And today you don't think about that all too much, but in 20 years you'll be those masters that people will come to for their co-ops or their first role and try to learn from. And what a master does to become a master, they have to make what's called a chef d'oeuvre. You guys have heard it. I don't know how to pronounce it in English, chef d'oeuvre or something like that. It's basically, if you go to see like the Mona Lisa in Paris, right? You think of it as Leonardo da Vinci's like main thing, right? That's what made him famous, right? So think of the chef d'oeuvre as like the thing that at your company that you've been maybe for 3 or 4 years, people go like, oh, that guy, that woman, she did this, and it was like it worked really well. They deployed it and it worked right away, and there were no problem, and it scaled and etc. Right? So at some point you'll be so competent in your craft that you'll be able to establish yourself as a master of sorts. And so that's what I think those French teach us here. So my next advice starts for you today. It might seem overwhelming. You go to classes, you do your projects, etc. But I'm going to do a little. I'll ask you guys to stand up for a second. We hire people that know Spring MVC and Spring Boot, right? And I think a lot of you learn Spring MVC in class. Is that correct? Can I get a few nods? Yeah? Okay. Who here has learned or will learn Spring MVC before the end of their class? Can you stand up? Just one person?
Full 18 class.
Full 18 class. Who's going to be in the full 18 class? Soon? Oh, you're all in full 18. I get it. But so if I ask you in a year, everybody's going to stand up, right? So my problem as someone who's going to hire people is that since I'm looking for Spring MVC class and I look at all of your resumes and you all say Spring MVC, but I can't hire all of you, I have to find the best one. How do I figure out who's the best Spring MVC person in that room? Well, we do a few things. We send a take-home exercise that Orvi here had to go through at some point, and we review the take-home, and we determine, Orvi did a pretty good job with that technology. So that's one way we do it. But one thing I also look at is I look at your resume, and at this point I've seen resumes, probably about 400 resumes from these programs, and I look at what makes you different from you. Right? And one of you has done just the class, just the exams and all of the projects and all of that, that's great. And maybe as a GPA of 4, and that's great. But you have decided to learn React, and you did a small project in React to enable you to like look up your books or what have you, right? So one person here, 2 people, because I hire 2 people from Northeastern pretty much every 6 months, one of you will have done something in addition to what you learn in class, and I look at that and I'll go like, that's interesting, right? That's important. And this characteristic of going beyond what you do normally in class during the exams or what have you is what I'm going to look at for co-ops, for junior developers, and for people with 20 years of experience, right? And that's what I do here. I say, never stop learning, never stagnate, right? If you look at what you knew a year ago and there's nothing you've added, whether as a student or much later on in your life, then you've stagnated. You haven't learned anything new, right? And you could blame your job, right? Many people will go like, I should change job because, I'm not learning anything new. It's like, this is the age of the internet. Like, just go to a web page. You want to learn about Kubernetes? That's what I'm doing right now, right? In the last couple weeks, I bought a PC, installed it at home, installed Linux, and tried to get Kubernetes to work on it. It's super complicated. But I decided to learn that. And before that, I built an iOS application. Before that, I built an Android application. Before that, I got a whole system, Unix system and cluster system going at home. I did like thousands of those things. Always find excuses to like do something at home to keep current. I code every day, but no one ever sees it at work. But I learn new technologies. I learn every day. And if you do that, it's going to make the difference between the standard Northeastern master resume, whatever program you're in, and the person sitting next to you, right? And who do you want to get the co-op? You or the person sitting next to you? Probably you, right? So that's what I do. I scratch an itch, I pick a stack, I'll want to do something, and I'll go like, I don't know React. So I'm going to do this thing in React. What was I doing the other day? I was trying to build a system that would like compress all of the videos on my system. So I built something in Python. I had never done Python in my life, right? So I built something, it's short, it doesn't do much, but I learned like the basic of Python, right? So all of these things are things that are going to make a difference, because though, and Urvi can attest to that, we pretty much do an 8 to 5, right? 9 to 5, 9 to 6 type job. I'm not asking anybody to work 80 hours a day, but I don't hire 9 to 5 people. I hire people who have a passion for computer software. And the only way to show passion is that you go like, oh, and I did this at home, and I do this. And in class, we didn't cover this, but I was interested in it, so I did a little bit of research in it. And what I do is I go well beyond the online tutorial. In fact, I mostly don't do the online tutorials, right? Because the online tutorials, they're going to teach you to do Hello World. And how many languages do you need to be able to do Hello World in, right? But pick something that you want to do, right? Like maybe you have an Android watch, right? Or an Apple Watch. Build an application for it, right? Maybe you have, a system at home to like turn on the lights. Buy a Raspberry Pi and do something that when you come home, it goes like welcome and it turns on all the lights or something like that. There's just so much we can do, right? And then, by the way, read books, right? I don't know if you guys have heard of books. They're not very popular these days. But books, are still very relevant, right? Especially on established technologies, right? And something like Kubernetes that I'm learning today has existed for actually 5 or 6 years. There's new things with this every day, but the basic of it hasn't changed all that much, right? So go to your library, go to, buy the books online, borrow the books online or what have you, but like read those, right? Because you'll see a lot, like people that read books, that write books, have thought long how they're going to introduce that technology to you, as opposed to the person who's writing an online tutorial for the clicks and for the ads. They're going to work for like 2 hours on it, and they're not going to think like teachers, right? As opposed to book writers who think a lot more like teachers. So online tutorials are not enough, and as I mentioned, class projects are not enough. Especially one thing that's frustrating to me when I read some of the resumes, not just yours, everybody, is, I've done, say, Spring MVC. I'm like, oh, great. So what context was that in? So the first thing that people do, that's a bit of a pet peeve when I do interviews, by the way, and your mileage may vary, that's just who I am, is when somebody explains to me what the project is about. Like, so we did this thing that allows you to like record books and blah, 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 and blah, blah. It's like, I don't really care, to be honest. What I care about is that you did it in Spring MVC, and you connected to this database, and you did it this way, and you were the one that did this part of it, because I know it's a group of 5, so when you say like Spring MVC, Hibernate, MySQL, React, project leadership, blah, 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 I know you did one of those 5 things, right? Tell me which one, right? And it's not bad, like it's the way it is. You've only done 1 or 2 of those things in the project. That's how you divide the work. You're not going to do everything, otherwise you're very unlucky, and you have 4 other very lucky teammates. But tell me like what you actually did in the project. That is really interesting to me. What was difficult, what was easy, what you learned. Like that's in an interview, that's what you want to do. And the cool thing about this is that you've actually done it, right? So for those of you that have problems of confidence during the interview, it's okay. Like this is stuff you've done. You can talk about it, right? It's much easier than trying to answer questions that you don't have the answer to. These you have the answer to. You did those projects. You were the one coding it. So explain to people what you actually did. It's much easier than trying to answer questions you can't answer. So these are our books. You'll recognize them from the photo. There's a lot of good books that I've really loved in here. Some of them are pretty technical, such as You Don't Know JavaScript. This is a book series I advise everybody to get and to buy. It's actually, you don't even need to buy it. You can just Google it. It's an open GitHub project. It's the whole You Don't Know JavaScript series. The way I think of it is JavaScript is very rarely taught in school. You learn Java, you learn C, you learn Rascal, you learn all of these things, but you don't typically learn JavaScript, at least not the way that it's usually taught academically. This teaches you the way it should be taught academically. And there's a probably 60% chance you'll be asked to do JavaScript in your next job, right? Whatever your job is, it's unlikely to be only back-end, so you're going to probably have to do a little bit of JavaScript, even if you're not a front-end developer. But all of these books I've found, like they're just basic books. They're really interesting. Building microservices. Most of your employers will build things with microservices. Regular expression. You can't really code without using one at some point. You've probably used them in your projects. Docker, something I've presented here, really important, I think. Functional programming with functional thinking. And then the God of all God books, Design Patterns. So that's the N patterns type book.
The template of a resume, right?
Yeah, like you should have read most of these books. You should have understood most of these books. You should be able to regurgitate all of these books. One question we ask is, what's a microservices? Then people answer it, and I say, why are they good? Why are they bad? What was before that? Why is this a better solution? Why is it bad in some cases? And if you've just read an article about it, you're not going to be able to answer those questions. If you've read this book, you will. Sorry. Okay. So two very important concepts to me, and here we're bleeding a little bit into you've already have you're in your first co-op or you're in your first job, right? And you've got to be successful at it. Not only successful so that you keep the job, but successful so that you get a better job after, or you get promoted where you are and you're just successful in your place of employment, or you're doing a co-op and that employer 6 months or a year later makes you an offer to join the company, right? So two important concept for me is ownership and craftsmanship, right? So ownership is basically going, I wrote something, there's a problem with it, or what have you, it's mine. I'm not going to look for excuses why it doesn't work. It's mine. And I'm going to do everything to make it work well, to write it well. Because also, if you don't, it's still yours. You can't, you might not claim it, but it's still yours. And when it breaks, people are going to come to you. And if it breaks, people are going to judge you and say, that wasn't very well written, right? So showing ownership, showing like, you know, think of it as, you know, you've built a table, right? You could build it quickly and it kind of like wobbles and eventually falls over, or you can build something really sturdy, and it's much easier if you build something very sturdy to go like, yeah, it's mine. You can sit on it. You can stand on it. This will not fall, right? And it links to the principle of craftsmanship, right? So it's building things well, right? Being a craftsman. Really important as well. And the thing about a craftsman that I always say is, and imagine this somebody who's like building things out of wood or whatever, is their tool. If you've ever had a parent who was a bit of a craftsman or liked to tinker in their garage or whatever, and as a kid you try to like play with one of their tools, like I know I have this reaction where I go like, don't touch this. This is my tool. You take it back, right? It's like, so tools are really important, right? And what are the tools for you guys, right? It's your computer, it's how it's configured, it's your IDE, it's your IDE preferences, etc. But importantly, it's your IDE, right? And I was, you know, when I grew up as an engineer, we didn't really have IDEs. We had text editors, we had VI, we had Emacs at some point, but they were just very basic. They allowed you to edit text. Now we have editors that do so much stuff, right? They can refactor code for you. It's very easy to jump to a method, to jump to a method documentation, to jump to all of the invocations of that method. I guarantee you that today, 99% of the people here use 10% of the capabilities of their IDEs, right? And learning that tool that is yours, that is unique to you, configuring it exactly the way you want it to be, is as important as being able to code in Java. That's my opinion, right? Because like, if you've ever sat behind somebody who's like really fluent in their IDE, it's like you're watching like a magic trick, right? They're like boop, 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 like oh, they jump here, like you don't see what they're doing. They're jumping between different bits of code within the same file across the project. They find things that, I mean, it's amazing, right? It's a beautiful thing to see. So whether you use, you know, if you do Java, whether you use Eclipse or IntelliJ or Sublime or Visual Code Studio or what have you, learn that IDE, right? It's really important. Learn Git. I mean, I don't frankly know any company out there that at this point is not using Git, right? It's everywhere. It's fairly simple, but there's a lot of subtleties to it. You have to learn how to do the basics, check out code, merge code, push code, commit code, etc. But you have to learn everything else, right? Like how do you branch? How do you merge branches? How do you fast forward? How do you roll back? Like learn all of this, because I guarantee you will use that in your next co-op or your next job. You have to know Git really well. And in the context of school, the truth is, most of the time you're not going to have to learn Git, right? You'll learn maybe the basics, right? But for example, in our take-home exercise, and only maybe 5% of the people actually do it, we say, we want you to point us to your GitHub repo that has the exercise, and what we want to see is a pull request that has all your code so that we can go and comment on it. About 5% of the people do that. Most of the people, they give us the Git repo and it has one commit. The first one says initial commit and the second one says work, right? And what we want to see is like the progression of things. Like first they added the database thing and then they added this and then they fixed this and then they fixed this bug and then they imported blah, 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 etc., right? We want to see that progression. And only if you know Git will you be able to work, as a modern developer. It's kind of like knowing your ID and mastering your ID. It's really important. The unique Unix command line interface. Some of you will end up building applications, .NET applications, and you'll never have to really learn Unix. But most of you at some point, even like if you're building Java apps or Python or Ruby or anything that's not .NET, you will have to deal with Unix. It has to be a second nature. You have to be able to demonstrate. People will ask you, like, do you know Unix? Do you know command line Unix? What are you able to do, right? At least being able to navigate folders, change commands, understand what the environment, the shell environment is. All of these things are important things. And I'm sorry if this seems overwhelming, but these are the things that, maybe not all of them, but as much as possible will distinguish you from the person sitting next to you to get the right co-op and the right job. And if you get the chance, learn something about Google Cloud Platform or Amazon Web Services. If you sign up today for either of those, you'll have a year worth of credit pretty much. Amazon does a year worth and Google Cloud gives you, I think, $300. And $300 goes a pretty long way, right? So learn all of these. When you build that Java app that you built in a class, deploy it on Google Cloud or on AWS, right? Do this thing to learn those, and these are probably not the things you'll be asked in class to do, but still do them. One thing that I've noticed with young engineers, whether they're co-ops or not, is the banging your head against the wall, right? Because you want to do good, right? You're given a problem, so you're going to just, go at it and go at it and go at it, and you're going to rewrite it, and it still doesn't work, and you're going to bang your head against the wall, and there's going to be blood, and it's going to be ugly. Don't do that. Don't do that. If you picked the right job or if you picked the right co-op, you'll have somebody to go to and say, I need help, right? And hopefully you're good enough that you don't need help often and you choose when you go and ask for help. But make sure, and we'll talk about that you get a co-op or a full-time position in a place where you can get good help, and that they understand that hiring a junior developer or bringing in a co-op doesn't mean just, junior developers will work for, little money and do a whole lot, right? They need to invest in them. And I'll talk about it, but in my company, when you start as a co-op, you have a designated mentor that is here to help you, right? So go to see them and say, I need help with this thing. And then don't over-engineer things. I mean, you're going to come out and you're going to say like, wow, I can build it this way or this way, and I'm going to make it so complicated, and it's going to be so elegant. Simple is best, right? You'll have a tendency, because you have all of these things in your brain, you'll have a tendency to want to make these beautiful, complicated constructs. You don't need that. It just needs to work, right? And with a little bit of guidance, you'll get there. Next, meet the experts. So I won't claim to be an expert, but you made a step today. You came to see somebody talk, right? And somebody was not a professor, so not somebody you've paid to talk to you and teach you something. Most of, conferences are free in some form or another, especially if you're a student. You can reach out and say, I'm really interested in this conference in Boston. I don't have any money. Do you guys have a program that allows student in? The last conference I went to in Portland, Maine, they have such a program, right? So they'll let half a dozen students in for free, right? A lot of these are free. I used to throw conferences, they were free. Go to them. Go to meetups. Go to meetup.com, register and say, I want to be part of the Node.js meetup. I want to be part of the React.js meetup. I want to be part of the JavaScript meetup. I want to be part, and you know what? It's free pizza. So you could be eating pizza for free every weeknight. I guarantee it. And if you're over 21, you can drink beer. Meetups are great. I wish I had more time to attend them. But you should attend one, I would say at least once a week, right? They have them on data science, on AI, on mobile development, just everything at this point. Like every technology, every language, there's a meetup in Boston happening this week probably about it. You just go to meetup.com and you'll see all of these. And then think of all the free online courses and certifications. You might be in a major that doesn't do deep learning, so you could go like, I didn't learn deep learning, sorry. Or you can go like, well, I did the intro on deep learning in Udacity or in like whichever of those free programs. There's probably literally hundreds at this point, right? Some of them even give certification, and you have to pay a little bit for it. It's like $50, $100, so you don't do like 100 of those, but maybe you invest in doing 2 or 3 a year, and you get that basic certification. We were talking about Amazon Web Services earlier, and I'm sure Google Cloud does the same. Get their solution architect associate certification. I think it's either free or $50, right? And again, we're talking about resumes. If you have that certification on the resume, but the person next to you doesn't, which one am I going to choose? I mean, it's pretty simple, right? Or which one, it's not even what am I going to choose, is if I look at 100 resume, which ones am I going to pull out, right? So there's one person who's never going to get a call or an email, and one person who's going to get the call. And without the call or the email, you don't get the interview, right? So it's important to do these things, and it's very easy to access. So one thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit, and when I wrote this fake news weren't really in the news. Now you guys all know what fake news are, right? There are fake news in computer science, right? Because everybody has an opinion. Everybody it's like, hey, how do I do this on Stack Overflow? And somebody goes like, oh, you do it this way, so you could do it this way. But it's the wrong approach, right? So my advice here is do not accept an answer you do not understand. So the copy paste from Stack Overflow, we all do it. But when you do it, you have to read and you have to understand what that code is or that special command, like what does it do? It's not that it's dangerous. I'm not saying they're trying to get you to delete all your files or something like that. But if you're grabbing that little piece of knowledge, understand what it is so that next time you'll be able to just do it. So be critical of those things. I taught a little bit of Docker. I invite you to go to anywhere on the internet, whether it's Google, Reddit, or whatever and you'll have 50% of the people that go, Docker is amazing, and then you'll have 50% of the people, the older crowd, that will say oh, Docker, no, it's not interesting, what a dumb idea, we failed at it, etc., right? So when you read an article that says a positive thing or a negative thing about something, just as if it was a political article in the Washington Post, be critical of it. Look at it and say, I have my own opinion. I'm going to read that one, and then I'm going to read the opposite opinion from somebody else. Somebody who says Docker is awful, right? And I'm going to make my own opinion. I'm going to understand why it's good and why it's bad. I'm going to talk about another pet peeve in a little bit as well. this is the interview, and this works for co-ops and non-co-ops. So I was interviewing a potential co-op today, and he's not here because he was from a university in Illinois. But how it opened is, he literally said, I went to your LinkedIn, and I looked at what you've done before. It gave me shivers. I was so excited, I didn't sleep. Who says that? I mean, you know, like you're coming for a job, you're interested in the position, you've read about the position, but don't tell me how great I am or how great the company is, right? Because when you say that, it tells me you don't really know what we do. You're just like showering us with compliments, right? I don't want to know how great I am. I want to discover how great you are, right? And so telling me like that the company's like, you know, I mean, Validity is doing well, but we've only existed for 6 months. So telling me like that we're probably the best company in Boston, like I hope we will be at some point, but there's a ton of great companies in Boston. So don't fake compliment me and tell me how great it is. And you all do this at some point or another in co-ops. I've heard it from hundreds of applicants. So just tell me like, you know what? I looked at your website and I tried to understand what your products do, right? And I went to, like in our case, the Salesforce website to read the reviews of your products. And I went on the internet and looked up that product and see what people's opinion is. But I still don't get it. Can you explain to me what your products do? This is a much better conversation that I love your product, it's so great. The company, oh wow, it's gonna be great, right? That shows that you actually have read about it and that you formed an opinion. Know why you're interviewing here. You know, it's like, in reality, you're interviewing here because that's the company that called you for an interview, right? It's, you know, especially as a co-op, that'll be true, you know, many times. But hopefully in the future, you'll have your choice, you'll have your pick, and you'll have 10 companies that want to interview you. And hopefully you won't go into 10 interviews, but you'll go into 3 and you'll explain to them, I am interviewing here because this is what is interesting to me. I looked on Glassdoor, it told me like why this is a good company. I've read reviews of your product, I know who your competitors are, right? And frankly, I've interviewed sometimes companies and I'm like, I know nothing about the company. It just sounds like a good job, right? Don't do what I did. Just really read up about the company, the products, and the potential that you might have here, right? And you know, when you do get that job, I'm not telling you to work 80 hours a week, but whether it's a co-op and you're hoping to maybe get a job with that company later, or just get a good evaluation on your thing that you can use later on, do your maximum, right? And it doesn't mean working 80 hours a week, but you know, maybe in that co-op you work a little harder, right? You show them, you know, how well you're doing. And Arshol used to be my co-op, and Orvi's currently my co-op, and they both are doing really well and did really well, right? And I've had co-ops that were like, you know, and they were talented, but they were not like working extra hard, right? They were just working. They were doing what they're asked to do, but not much more. This is your chance, right? Like, you're not going to wait to do extra well like 10 years into your career. Like, do extra well now so that like when somebody calls me because you've done a co-op with me, and somebody I know calls me and say, hey, you did a co-op with that person. Were they good? I'm like, were they good? They were great. You should hire them today. Don't interview them, just go hiring them. I've said that to people, right? And that's because that person did really well. And usually it's like, I wish I could hire them, but I can't because I don't have a rec or whatever. But it's really important to shine in that first co-op or in that first job. So give it the old college try. So back about 15 years ago, 18 years ago, someone named Joel, who had a software blog called Joel on Software, figured out like 12 criteria that make a good software company for a software engineer. And I invite you guys to Google it. And a lot of those are still, fairly relevant. Some of them they're a little passé, right? Like, like some are passé because it's like, do you have a bug database, right? It's like, back in the day, not everybody had a bug database, so it was like good practice to have one, so you wanted to like make sure they had one. These days, if they don't have a bug database, you just walk out, right? If they don't have something like Clubhouse or Jira, or they use GitHub Issues or whatever, if they're just like pieces of paper or whatever, Word document, Excel documents, just walk out, right? Other things like, do you have, do you always, do you use source control, right? Like, it's like, yeah, they use source control. Let's just ask them what kind of source control they use, however, right? So these need to be updated a little bit, but there's still a lot of them make complete sense. About like number 9, so there was a developer that came to see me, Ryan, recently, and so he was starting to work there. Actually, it was before he signed the offer, and he said, so I use this, so he's a .NET developer, so I use this piece of software, I think it's called Refactor.net or something like that. It's from the people that make IntelliJ. Said, I use it, I really like it, would you be able to buy it, right? And for me, it's like 100%. Going back to those tools, it's really important that the developers have the tools, right? So we buy them really good computers, we buy them the software that they need, and we expect them to do really well with that, right? Like I even because I don't like those really thin like Apple keyboards, right? I like the big clicky ones. So I go like, do you like your mouse? Do you like your keyboard? Because guess what? You're going to be working 8 hours plus a day on that mouse and that keyboard. So I want to make sure you like it, right? I want to make sure you like typing on it. It seems silly, but you're going to do a lot of that in the next few years. So make sure that you actually formulate an opinion on what you like as a mouse and what you like as a keyboard. So the Jolt test, you could update it. You can go download it, by the way. You can also look at the Jolt test for 2017, which is a little updated, right? And, I would expect at least, I think with validity, we have, close to 12 out of 12 of those. And I would expect at this point most companies do. The new Jolt test that this guy updated, most companies will probably have 6 or 7 of those, right? And you want to ask people, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I always tell candidates, the goal of this interview, especially the final interview, is when you leave, I want to know whether I want to hire you or not. When you leave, you want to know whether you'd accept this offer or not, right? And I've been into plenty of interviews where I'm leaving and I'm like, I'm good. I'm not going to, nope, we're good. We're not going to do this. Thank you. And, obviously as an interviewer, I've been in many situations where I go like, you know what, this candidate didn't go well and for me it's a no, right? But in order for you to walk out of the interview and be able to say, I really want to work there, and do the extra mile, maybe then send the thank you note, send a note saying, you know what, I'd said that, and now I think more about it, it's really this. Do the follow-up and do everything you need to get that job. You need to know whether you want that job, right? And you might be in a situation with co-ops where you just want a co-op, let's be real, right? Any co-op will do, you want a co-op. But at least for that first job, you want to be a little discerning and make sure that you get a job that you want. And for that, you have to ask questions, right? So these questions are a good start. The other ones, are good as well. Do you send your developers to conferences? What do you do around knowledge sharing? How often do you release? What's your test coverage? Do you have a PR review process? What are your core value in your engineering team? So ask those questions, right? Nothing is more frustrating than, okay, I'm going to leave 5 minutes or 10 minutes towards the end so you can ask me questions. And we're at the end of the interview and I go like, okay, what are your questions? Nothing. 90% of the candidates have no questions, right? Well, if you need a cheat sheet, take that one. Pick 2 or 3 questions from this one and ask them, right? If they weren't covered during the interview, talk about them, right? Maybe even during the interview. It's like, oh, like you're asking me how much I know about Git. That's interesting. I know about Git. What is your branching model? What do you use for Git server? Is it GitHub? Like all of these things, right? It's a way to like if somebody goes like, oh, yeah, I know Git, and like, what about you? Like, what do you actually do with Git? It's like, that's good, right? That's a dialogue. It's not just like going like, check, knows Git, etc. But actually knows Git, is interested in Git, knows enough to ask intelligent questions. All right. So that's important in the co-op and the and your first job. And I'm writing a whole presentation on this actually. As co-ops or future co-ops, you have an unalienable right to being mentored. It's not an option. You're not like a junior developer that knows everything or co-op that knows everything. You're somebody that is working towards a degree and doesn't know everything and is going to have problems, right? If all co-ops had the answers to everything, I'd be hiring 80 of them every 6 months, not 2, right? But the truth is, when we hire you, we know that you're going to be able to do a lot of things, but you're also going to slow us down a little bit. And you're going to slow us down because my company commits to giving you a mentor, and that mentor is not just told you have to mentor this person, but that person is actually told, if you want a promotion in the future, you have to show me that you've mentored well 2 or 3 people. That, when, say Arshol finishes his co-op, like he can tell me like, PJ was an awesome co-op. Worked with him every day. He was always with me when I had questions, and he was, right? He was an awesome mentor. And that's my promise to my co-ops, is that I'm going to put somebody who's really going to work hard with you at making you successful, right? And it's important for me because, remember, I want you to start working for me 6 or 12 months later in your cases, and maybe 2-3 years later if it's an undergrad co-op. So you deserve that mentorship. It's your right. It's not only your right, but it's your duty. It's kind of like voting, right? You have a right to vote, but you also should vote, right? Here you have the right to get mentorship, but you should demand mentorship. You should get mentorship. You should work with your mentor, right? It's really important. But on the other hand, you don't deserve it. I mean, what are you doing to deserve it? Are you working hard? Are you really asking questions? One of my other pet peeves, it seems I have a lot of them, is people who tell me they understood, right? And it's somewhat cultural. There's different, cultures that tend to like not want to say, no, I didn't understand, and they want to like go back and try to understand it on their own and will never say like, no, I didn't understand. I encourage you to say, I do not understand. I encourage you to actually repeat what you understood, right? That's the best test. If I explain something to you, repeat it to me, not verbatim, not like just like a parrot, but repeat to me what you understood of it. So you go like, I explained to you like how to do this thing. So like, oh, okay, so what you're saying is that I should connect to this system and then do this, and I'll need an SSH key, and then I'll use the command line to do this. Then I'll transfer the file and I can use the file, right? Like I want you to repeat it to me. And to be perfectly honest, I've had that experience with a lot of co-ops, right? It's true of a lot of you guys that, it's hard to admit, like, I didn't know, I'm sorry, I didn't get it. Like, I wasn't born in the US, so the first few years I was like, what? I don't even understand what words you used, right? And you guys will be in those, in those circumstances. Some of you, still have difficulty with English, and you'll be in those situations where you don't really understand, and you have to have the person, explain it again, and that's okay, right? Because that's how you learn. So make sure you deserve that membership, that you really work towards it, and you just don't like use it as a crutch. And if you guys took a photo of this, there was someone that didn't work for me but worked with me and was a junior developer, Alice. She was out of New York, and she did this presentation at a conference that I put together, and this was one of the best presentations about mentorship. Hello. Yep. Okay, we're going to speed up a little bit. There's this idea that you can know everything. In your curriculum, you've been asked to do projects that have a UI, a web interface, or what have you, and a backend, right? Even for those projects where it's an algorithm type class, you'll probably be asked to do a UI. And then there will be projects that will be UI heavy, but there will be a bit of a backend, right? What I encourage you to do is pick one, right? Doesn't mean you won't do the other one, but get really good at one of them, right? I've never met somebody who was great at both. I've met a lot of people that are great in the back end and that can hack something together in the front end, or great at the front end and that could do a few simple things on the back end. And you know what? I want to hire back-end people and I want to hire front-end people. They're both good. They're both in need. Like if you're a great Java back-end developer, no Spring Boot, Spring MVC, all that jazz, you're going to find a job. If you're a great React.js, Ember, Angular, JavaScript, etc. developer, you're going to find a job as well. But if you're at both of them, it's going to be hard to find a job, right? Because you have to be good at something, right? So what I encourage you to do is either focus on one or focus on the other. Don't focus on both. You won't get good at both, right? There's maybe one person in this room who can be good at both. And I'm not going to hire you, by the way, because I'd rather have someone who's really focused. Learn about one or learn about the other, get decent at the other, and kind of move on, right? So it's a brand new world out there. When I grew up as an engineer or as a developer, we did development, right? We coded. That's what we did, right? And that was the end of the world. Like all of our world was we coded, right? Now it's a bit more complicated. You're engineers. You're not just developers. You're not just coders. I hate that. Like, what do you do? I'm a coder. What do you do? I'm a programmer. Programmer is this thing that you have at home that turns on the light automatically, right? You're an engineer, just like people who know how to build bridges or to build planes or design planes rather. That's what you are. Except your world is code. You're a maker. You make those virtual things that sometimes have a physical impact. And what you do is not just code. You gather information on how to do it. You think about how you're going to do it. You're going to design it. You're going to code it. And coding is not as simple as just coding. Otherwise, you'd be an administrative assistant, right? You just type things, type letters. You're going to refactor code that exists. You guys are going to spend a lot of time maintaining existing code. That's just the life of any software engineer, right? You're going to write documentation on somebody else's code or your own code. You're going to be testing. Like, this is not the world of like, here are the QAs, they're going to test your work, and you're going to be a developer and write your thing and then throw it against the wall and say, hey, you go test it, right? You're going to be testing it. You're going to be writing unit testing. You're going to be writing automated testing. You're going to do all these things. And then you're going to do application development, which is the code part, right? And by the way, there's more. There's, once you get a little more seasoned, you're going to do mentorship, so that other people can get mentored. You're going to do knowledge sharing. You're going to sit in front of the other developers and say, and we do that at Validity, we did that at Evertrue. You're going to say, hey, I learned how to do Cypress.io the other day for a project, so I'm going to sit down with you guys in our engineering all ends meeting. I'm going to show you what I discovered, right? That's the knowledge sharing part. Sometimes it's a demo, sometimes it's like, hey, come see it, I'll show it to you. Sometimes it's documentation, could be a video, could be anything. Eventually a blog. And then obviously some of the engineering work is DevOps, right? Working with these cloud systems, these Unix systems. Really important as well. We used to have system administrators, and some companies still do, and they have a real separation of concern, but in startups we tend to try to do everything. And engineering is a team effort, right? Like, you don't want to be the single engineer that designs the bridge, because when it breaks, it's all on you, right? So if you work with a team, you'll be able to check on each other and make sure you don't make mistakes. So not only is it going to be distributed ownership and responsibility, but you're going to do better work, and that bridge is not going to break. I'm going to skip these. So let me talk a little bit about opportunities at Validity, because I have to. Validity was created in February of this year. We started with acquiring 2 companies around the data validation market. What we were trying to do is basically get a head start, right? So instead of spending 2 years writing code and eventually having a product, we went and bought 2 companies with great products and great revenue, but awful sales and marketing. And then we hired 60 sales people and 10 marketing people, and we're marketing and selling the hell out of it. While we do that, we improve the existing products and we build new products. So if you do a co-op at Validity, you could be doing .NET development, you could be doing Ruby development, or you could be doing Java development, right? And on the front end, you probably would be doing React.js development. So it's brand new, but because I've done co-ops with Northeastern since 2006, co-ops with your programs for about 2 years now, we invest in those co-ops the way I've described it to you. So I was presenting during a board meeting the other day, and my first at Validity, and my CEO said, you have to talk about our co-op program. And then as I was starting to talk, he started to talk, and he said, guys, you put together a co-op program right away, and we hired our first co-ops. When was it? August you guys started, right? So within I started in May, June, July. So within 3 months I had hired 2 co-ops, right? And he said, so he hired these 2 co-ops, and I didn't really believe in it. I let him do it because whatever, but it's a little early in the company to have co-ops. But it's not, right? The 2 co-ops we have are doing great work. And he maybe would have wanted to do just 1 co-op, but I think co-ops have to be in pairs. They're kind of like hamsters, we are successful with these co-ops. And for the time being, we're going to have 2 co-ops every semester, unless we get big enough that we can have 3 or 4 or more, right? So as I mentioned, our co-ops, when they start, they have an assigned mentor. We don't give you, and I think you can attest to that, and you can as well, we don't give you you don't go and Xerox stuff and make copies for us, right? You don't go and do this little bit of coding on this project that's not interesting to us. That's what I would use an intern for. I would go and find somebody from high school to work on their first project. Maybe I'd give them a little bit of work like this. No, we give you actual product work that that customers use. I think within a week or less, you were shipping something in an iOS app that the customers of EverTrue were using that week, right? So you have to ship and ship it right away. And so we're right in Boston. We're pretty much walking distance from here. We're in the John Hancock Tower. It's the big blue tower. The view is impressive. 22nd floor. You could just stare at the view all day. You won't. But it is a really nice place to work, and beyond the view, we try to really make it a good place to work. We left around 3:30, and I had to have a cider at beer, our beer gathering that we try to have every Friday, because I didn't want to be drunk in front of you guys, so I just had a cider. But it's fun. Like, it's not like ping pong table and foosball tables, but we have fun. We like working with each other. We are courteous and happy, and we work all well together, and it's a good forum. So that's who we are, and that's important. And if you want to, submit your resume, providing you fit all the criterias highlighted in the 16th slide before this, please do so. We haven't selected anyone for January 2019 yet. If you're looking for a co-op in August 2019, you can also send the resumes. You can apply on our website. Just say like, hey, I'm looking for something more for August, and kind of get in. And we have hired co-ops much earlier than that. So that's us. So the last thing, and perhaps the more important thing, and why we have time booked, is let's do Q&A, right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question?
Who wants to start? Go ahead.
You mentioned about MVC, right? To what extent do you use MVC?
So we use MVC frameworks quite a bit, but just beyond the framework, just the idea that you separate those things is important, right? It's there. I've lived through those changes over like 20 years of software development, right? And a lot of the things I talked about, DevOps and all that stuff, right? It's like we figured out a lot of things in the last 20 years. So you'll find that in one shape or another, most companies use an MVC type approach. Not always a framework. We tend to use Spring Boot and Spring MVC. On the Ruby side, we use Rails. On the JavaScript side, we use React, which is mostly a Vue framework, right? But it allows us to at least separate the Vue from the M and the C. So we use those concepts for sure, and we use the frameworks as well. Go ahead.
I'm wondering, what is the desired skills that the employee want from their applications? I mean, when we are looking for information about finding a job, the internet, it says most about, you need to be very good at the algorithms, but they don't say nothing else except from
Sure.
lead code. Yeah. So
Yeah.
what is the rest of it?
Sure, and so the question is essentially, what are people really looking for beyond the algorithms, right?
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, you need that basic knowledge of algorithms, and I'll give you. I think it's worth giving a good example of that, and I think we did it with Urvi, if I recall correctly. So we have a bit of a whiteboard exercise, right? And I say, here's a set of data A and a set of data B. And if I recall correctly, they're each sorted, right? I want you to create C, which is the union of both, and I still want it to be sorted, right? So I ask this question. I think I ask it to you, right? And the goal is not so much that you answer it right away. The goal is for me to see how you're thinking, right? So when you're talking about algorithm, I need to know that when I give you, this thing of taking two sets that are sorted and making it into one, it's pretty simple, but you're going to end up doing it like every now and then, right? So all of these basic tasks of merging things or etc. And sometimes, Java will have just like one method call is like you take one set, you take the other, merge them, order, like great, but sometimes they won't, right? So I think that the basic core of being smart and understanding data structure and being able to work with them is important, right? What people will mostly see in a job description is, experience with Spring, experience with JavaScript, experience with this, etc. Right? And these are kind of like the check marks, right? If you don't have them, like frankly, if you're looking for a junior development job at our company, and we're opening one pretty soon, and you don't have Spring MVC and Spring Boot experience, we probably, unless you are amazing in everything else, we probably won't hire you, right? And there's been cases with co-ops and not that we've gone like, well, we think we can teach that person. That person's teachable, right? But knowing these things is a good start, right? So going through it and trying to understand kind of what is the requirement. But it's going to be, a lot of it is going to be about communication. A lot of it's going to be about like, like trying to understand your thought process when you're in front of the whiteboard and I'm asking you. We do a take-home exercise, so what we say is basically go build it. Like you don't have to, like we're not watching over your shoulder trying to see how you code, right? Like you're going to be in your dorm, you're going to be doing it. You want to spend, we usually say 4 hours, you want to spend 8 hours on it, get something really, really clean. That's what's going to impress her. Last year, Arshil worked with him. We did a take-home exercise like that with a co-op from Northeastern, co-op candidate, Matt, I think his name was. Is that right? Yeah, Matt. And that take-home exercise was amazing. I mean, just like looking at it, we were all like, wow. Like, I don't remember what, the take-home exercise was like import a CSV and like show the data on the screen in categories or something like that. You did something where it was like a map of the world and you could see where the people were and you would click and you'd see the thing, and it was like beautiful work on the back end, beautiful work on the front end. It showed like a complete mastery of that, right? And that works for us, right? Like if we see something and we go like, you know what, like that person like paid attention to the take-home exercise, spent the time on it, and they were able to talk about it, right? Because the problem is, say you've done Spring MVC and I ask you like, so Spring MVC, like it? All right. But if I've seen you use it, I can go like, well, he knows how to use Spring MVC. Right? He's done an application. And yeah, I mean, you guys have very little experience with these things, right? So we'll look at it and we're like, this could have been done better and this could have been done better, but this is one of the best take-home exercise using Spring Boot and Spring MVC that we've had, right? And so that's one of the reasons we do. I mean, right now, I'm trying to get one undergrad and one master's student in the next co-op. So I've sent, I think, so we went to the undergrad fair and we gathered a bunch of resume, and I basically just said, go and do the take-home exercise. Everybody, just go and, everybody we selected. So we sent to 30 people the take-home exercise, right? Because we think that, instead of doing 30 interviews, like phone screens that lead to nothing, we just say like, we looked at the resume, we think that person can do the take-home exercise, and we give it to them. And then after that, they come in and they do the whole interview.
Okay. For those of you who have a class, you might want to be able to leave if you want to. So we'll continue the conversation otherwise. Okay. Any other questions? So I'll ask a small question. So on campus, every once in a while, a student will copy or paste a snippet of code that's not theirs. And we either penalize them or let them go or whatever, right? But it's,
Sure.
this is a place for students to learn. What's the consequence of something like that in a corporate setting?
Well, so I think I have two responses. So the question is, if you copy paste code from somebody else, what's the consequence, right? So I would say on one end, there's really big consequences, right? There can be huge legal repercussions, right? Because you could have taken code from an open source project that uses, say, the GPL license, and what that means is that if I took that code and put it in a commercial product, this commercial product suddenly has become open source. Right? So the company you were working with that's selling its product for $10,000, $100,000, $1 million, suddenly everybody should have access to the source code, right? So in a corporate environment, this could have dire consequences, so you don't do it innocently, right? That said, you could be copying code in a work environment from Stack Overflow, right? And Stack Overflow is free for all, right? But you have to know what you're copying. I was saying earlier, like, you have to understand it, right? And maybe what you do is you don't copy paste it, you just understand it, then you go back to your code and you write your own version of it, right? But it's true that if you go to GitHub and you find a project that does something similar to you, and you either take a bit of code or a whole thing, if you're not careful, depending on that open source license, it could really dangerously compromise that company's software. So it can be pretty serious. That said, Google has done it, right? And they were kind of slapped, and that was it, right? But
for a young engineer to be fired from their job,
it's possible.
consequences are incredible there.
Yeah,
Right there.
it's absolutely possible. So I encourage you to read it and go you know what? I get it. I get how it's done, and I'm going to do my own version of it.
Very good. All right. Okay, I think this is good. Thank you so much. Eric.
Sure.
We appreciate the time. So you see, I told you this is a good plan. This is a way to prepare yourself for planning for the spring schedule. Eric just showed you all possibilities here, what you can do to prepare yourself for co-op. Thank you so much, Eric. This was
Sure thing.
amazing. It's one thing in it, looking at how we grew up in the software world, that we think of ourselves that this is what we do every day, versus the world of check boxes now. How do I pass the exam? How do I pass the job interview? What Derek is talking about is you as a person with all these capabilities that have nothing to do with passing a test or anything. You would never be yourself trying to fit into these exams. But the set of skills you need here is the stuff that you're doing every day. That's how we grew up. I never thought of an exam or a job interview. I said, I like to learn Unix. I like to play with this. Just a way of life, right? So be a data engineer or functional analyst or a programmer. This stuff is what you practice every day. And I think this is the message I was hearing from Eric today. Thank you so much for being
Sure.
with us.
Thank you.
So you're going to be around if they want to
Yeah.
ask questions?
Yeah.
No residents today, right?
Are you gonna run the Docker section? Are you gonna run the Docker section?
Yeah.
When is it? When are we scheduling?
I don't think we have a date yet,
we
do
don't
we?
have a date?
Yeah, but you'll hear about it. So I'm going to be giving, probably over the next year, a few sessions. I think we're thinking about doing Docker on one side and Agile Scrum on the other, which are, at least Agile Scrum, I think, is just mandatory for anybody to have understood. And Docker, I think, is really interesting as well. There's someone that works with me, that worked with me at ConstContact, and that we're lucky to have at Validity, who was Urvi's Urvi's mentor. Andrew is going to do a session on Spring Boot, which I think will be really interesting. So more of a kind of a tutorial workshop type thing. So we'll schedule that in the next few months, and I think it'll be a Wednesday late afternoon or something like that.
Right. I remember my advisor used to tell me, go into a lecture or a presentation will save you so many hours of research and digging that you have to do. And you're getting the deep insight what the key ideas are. So these presentations that Eric and Matthew, is it?
Andrew.
And Andrew are offering to our students. This is just all partnership and volunteer effort from their part, just their contribution to the program for the good work you guys been contributing to their company. So, so keep an eye on these workshops. They're important, and they're coming from this amazing co-op program and their leader, Marikala, right, and the passion and effort they're putting in this whole exercise. So you have to appreciate and value these sessions and make sure you are here when we need you. There's a reason why we're here today. It's a very important reason. So thank you for being here, all right? Thank